Hello again, friends. You're in for another installment of this Summer Reads BDSM Erotica. So, the last thing, or the last part of the story that I actually read, I think it was the epilogue, and there was a part in the middle of the book where he was ridden like a horse and had a corn cob up his ass. So, we're gonna go to the beginning. Not quite as far in the beginning as the first video, but, it's talking about how his love for a lady's whip first began. Oh, and if you love my furry jacket, I'm wearing a bomber jacket. I'm so cool. Anyway, let's get to it. I say that I did not learn the taste for being whipped by women until after my time at Eppingham. There, indeed, I was cruelly beaten, though not unfortunately, by the sweet cruelty of women. But this one experience did lead me to taste a woman's whip, and for a long time I felt bitter at my humiliation. Foolishly bitter! It was shortly after the armistice, and everywhere in Europe was in turmoil, not least in our already confused little quarter. Remember, again, this is a World War I period piece, or post-World War I. My friend said that this was a very niche book. Period piece, BDSM erotica. So, there you go. If you like this book. Not sure how many other options are out there, but I really don't want to know. Or do I? No one knew which territory was going to belong to whom, and there were officials and troops in strange uniforms, militias and lawless bands, so that everything was uncertain. Nevertheless, I continued to do my plodding work of transportation. I was pulling a head cart on a familiar isolated mountain pass in deep snow when I was accosted by a customs patrol wearing unfamiliar uniforms and speaking a language I thought was Slavonic. The handcart was not heavy, and I thought it might contain papers or perhaps rolled-up paintings of old masters, but certainly no brandy or tobacco. At any rate, I was rather frightened. They wore heavy greatcoats against the cold, but I perceived that one of them was a female, though all I could see were her eyes under her fur hat. They took me to the hut of recent construction, and hence, unknown to me, I would naturally have taken another path. The lady seemed to be in charge, and dismissed the others. She was sheathed in a military greatcoat of black leather, with a fur hat and scarf, yet I was not unaware of the supple curves of her body beneath, nor of the delicate female fragrance under the sweat and grime. Her eyes stared, piercing me, and they seemed angry and soft at the same time. It was warm inside the customs shed from a stove. I assured her truthfully that I was ignorant of my cargo and offered the usual bribe of the gold thaler I carried for that purpose, but she spurned it very righteously, and in anger. She barked in fractured Italian that I was to strip completely. I was terrified. She had a gun and also a heavy whip coiled at her belt, like a horsewhip, beside the ungainly canister of an army gas mask. So, trembling in fear and shame, I obeyed. She left the hut to inspect my cart, leaving me naked. When she returned, she said my cart was full of valuable papers and would be confiscated, and that I should be flogged as a spy, only my youth excusing me a harsher chastisement. She said this quite casually, as though a naked flogging administered by a female to a male were quite natural. I was ignorant of any sort of beating, but did not plead for mercy, despite my horror of pain, since it seemed that this was mercy. I shivered hopelessly, not just at the prospect of being flogged, but at being alone and naked, and completely in a strong lady's power. She ordered me to stand against the hot stove, which was painful enough in itself, and spread my legs. She proposed to beat me on the buttocks. She uncoiled the whip from her belt and cracked it in the air, and I moaned. It was a fearsome implement, fully 6 or 7 feet long. Then she flogged me on the bare bottom. The first stroke cut me raw, and I gasped and squealed. The second was worse, and the third 10 times that. I danced and wriggled, clutching the stove as she told me not to move from my place, or more severe punishment should befall me. I could not imagine any punishment more severe, or any worse shame. Boy, are you in for it. My head swam with pain, each lash of that fearful whip making my bare bum smart in horrid, searing agony, such as I had never imagined could exist, let alone be applied to my body. I tried to count the strokes with stuttering teeth, but could not. The whip whistled in the air with dreadful meaning, and cracked mercilessly on my bare buttocks, snaking even more painfully, and with practiced skill, down over the backs of my thighs. I twisted my head to plead for her mercy, the tears streaming down my face, but she barked that I was not to look at her. I glimpsed that she had her leather coat open, and her hand was between her thighs at the crotch of her gray uniform skirt, moving gently as she whipped me. At length I heard her pant louder and more hoarsely, and gulp as much as I gulped in my maddening pain. The whip cracks grew fiercer and more rapid, and I danced in my agony, squealing as the skin of my buttocks felt flayed from me by her bare lashes. I heard her cry out repeatedly, very softly, as though she was trying to stifle her own cries of pain, and then with a gasping breath she told me my punishment was over, and that I had taken 6 strokes with that whip on my bare flesh. I saw her look pointedly between my legs, a thin smile creasing her lips. I looked down, aware of a throbbing sensation that was not pain, and saw to my horror that my penis had risen, and had stood erect and clearly visible to my chastiser throughout my whipping. This increased my humiliation. I was told to dress, and dispatched red-faced and whimpering without my cart. It was now extremely uncomfortable to walk. My father was philosophical about the matter of my cargo. I did not admit that I had been whipped, but I cried myself to sleep with bitter resentment at my humiliation, to be flogged, and by a woman. To smart so much under a female's whip seemed the greatest outrage to my male person. And yet, when my smarting had subsided to a warm glow, I had to check myself from finding the sensation actually pleasant. I felt my ridged, puffy bottom and inspected myself in the mirror. I had taken a full 60 strokes with a real whip, more than many judicial punishments, and had taken it like a man. My buttocks were fearfully scarred and wheeled, and dark-mottled crimson streaked with ugly purple and black welts. Yet, as I embarked for England, still blushed with the marks of my punishment, I could not help feeling a certain pride in my endurance. I remember the female aroma of the cruel lady, the smell of her leather and her sweating boots, and the strange way she had rubbed herself between her thighs, and as though my flogging had given her pleasure, and I came to the conclusion that my beating had served some purpose, and that purpose she had been merciful after all. There you go.